When an officer from the same department Steven Avery was suing found the key that led him to Teresa Halbach's car, even former prosecutor Ken Kratz knew he had his work cut out for him.
It was, I think, the very first bump in the road, if you will, from an investigative standpoint, where I was able to predict this was going to be something the defense was going to talk about.
But then that wasn't the only evidence they had pointing at Avery. There was also his blood inside Teresa's car, and even though the defense claimed it was planted, what viewers of Making a Murderer never saw was the non-blood DNA police also found on the latch under Teresa's hood.
The non-blood DNA was most likely from skin cells from Steven Avery's hand. That's really hard to explain, and so the filmmakers chose, rather than to explain it, they chose to ignore it. They've been asked why would you not put that in? They said that wasn't very important. They know that was a central part of my closing argument, and the jury certainly heard it. The jury knew that that was important.
While the documentary did focus on the burn pit found just outside of Avery's garage, containing the charred bones of Teresa Halbach, there were other artifacts the film didn't discuss. A burn barrel containing a scorched cell phone, PDA, and camera.
And further investigation determined the phone to be of the same make and model that Teresa had. The PDA was determined to be the same as a PDA that Teresa had, and the camera was the same make and model of the camera that Teresa used.
Avery was arrested not because he was set up, Fassbender says, but because the evidence was screaming his name. Avery himself wasn't talking other than to say he was innocent. But then, he wasn't the only one with something to say.
Why don't you just have a seat, Brendan?
How did you determine what happened to Teresa?
Well, a lot of that was an interview with Steven's nephew, Brendan Dassey.
How many times did Steven shoot her?
About 10.
Steven's nephew, Brendan Dassey, the boy who would confess to police that Steven killed Teresa and that he helped dispose of the body.
Where'd you get the bleach from?
In his house, but in his bathroom.
But was this confession coerced? Do you think, though, he had the ability to truly comprehend what was going on when he sat there with you, and that everything he said to you could be used against him?
I do.
A federal judge now says Dassey could not have understood. The judge ruled Dassey, who was 16 at the time, had an IQ so low that his comprehension was that of a 4th grader. Add to that, the teen was interrogated without his mother or an attorney present. The court threw out Dassey's murder conviction and ruled he should be freed, a decision which is still being disputed. The court said it did not appear that Dassey's testimony was voluntary.
Yes, I respect the courts. Do I agree with the decision? No, because I lived this and I know what I saw. I think he provided a lot of information that he didn't have to provide.
Did he invite you in?
Yeah.
Okay, and where was she?
In his room.
He said he saw her in the bedroom, restrained. He claims to have had sex with her. Steven may have stabbed her and then ultimately shooting of her, where he says he shot her twice in the head.
And it was Brendan talking about those shots that would become one of Fassbender's biggest gripes with Making a Murderer. He says you'd never know by watching that this was actually one of the moments which helped seal the prosecution's case.
All right, I'm just gonna come out and ask you, who shot her in the head?
He did.
Why didn't you tell us that?
That's where they stopped that video. This is the actual video.
Why didn't you tell us that?
Because I couldn't think of it.
Now you remember it? Tell us about that then.
That he shot her with his 22.
You were there though.
Yeah.
He says that he shot her with his .22. We didn't tell him anything about that. We didn't know about that. That is detail that he provided.
And that the filmmakers didn't show.
She was on a the garage floor.
With that information, we end up getting another search warrant for that garage. And during that search, 2 bullet fragments are found. One toward the rear of the garage behind all this stuff under I think it was an air compressor. That same bullet fragment is found to have Teresa's DNA on it.
Just like Brendan had said, it was a .22, and not just any .22.
The part that Making a Murderer absolutely omits, does not talk to the audience about, is the fact that that bullet is forensically traced back to the gun that's hanging over Avery's bed.
Ballistics tests confirmed the bullet was a perfect match to Avery's rifle confiscated months before.
Now, process that a little. If I were to plant evidence, now I got to get Steven's gun. I've got to fire the bullet from Steven's gun. I got to recover that bullet. Now, I got to find Teresa's DNA and put her DNA on that bullet fragment. And then I got to get back in that garage at some time and put it in there. And on top of it, why, if I was going to plant it, why would I put it in the back of the garage under a compressor? Why wouldn't I put it somewhere where someone's going to see it?
You mean like next to the key?
Exactly.
And the juries had a hard time believing it as well. Both Steven Avery and Brendan Dassey were ultimately found guilty of first-degree murder, the dramatic finale to the trial, and later, the film. But after that came the backlash.
Right after Making a Murderer came out, there was a pretty concerted effort to drive me out of business. I had car windows shot out, I had damage to property, I had very specific threats made against me, even to the extent of somebody hoping that my daughter got raped and that I would be made to watch it.
Thankfully, Ken says he doesn't actually have a daughter. He also says he's not necessarily surprised by the response.
This docudrama cast its villains very intentionally. Me, because I was the lead prosecutor, and I think because of my personality, which at the time wasn't, all that great. I have admitted to narcissism, and I had admitted to being kind of a jerk a lot of times.
And then there were the more serious allegations brought up against the then-married prosecutor at the end of the documentary.
There were some things that came out about you, one of which is that you were sexting and having an inappropriate relationship with a woman who was a domestic violence victim. How do you explain that part?
I asked to meet this girl for a drink, for a beer, after her case was over. I called her a hot young nymph. Look, it's clumsy, it is stupid, but it wasn't sexual. Having said that, every time I make these explanations, it sounds like excuses. It's the last thing I want to do here. I'm not a victim. I put myself in that position.
Kratz did lose his marriage and much more as a result. But there was one person who didn't seem to think Ken was such a villain. Someone who even tried to hire him after the case. A man viewers of Making a Murderer might be familiar with.
So on June 18th, 2013, Steven Avery wrote to me. His letter simply reads,
Coming up,
we can all get money together.
Avery speaks from behind bars to the man who put him there and...
Oh, who's this?
A surprise chat with Steven Avery's brother.
I'm outside, Chuck. By any chance, could you come out?